And so the new Battletome for the Naked Dwarfs, the Fyreslayers, came out this weekend. So I've been having a little read through it and deciding whether or not I can make a reasonable list out of what is, after all, a very limited army. And here's what I found out. So the first thing I want to try out is the dice, because these I absolutely love. They are, it's not just the designs on them. Although, I mean, the only criticism I ever have of these dice is when they have a separate special symbol for 6 and for 1. Not so much from the point of view of the person using them, but again, you've also got to think with dice rolls in Age of Sigmar, indeed any Warhammer game, you want to get them done fairly quickly, move on. You know, your opponent may not be familiar with them, so, you know, making it clear from the start that that is a 1 and that is a 6, and then letting it sink in when you've rolled them just takes a little bit longer. So I'd prefer it for just a special symbol on 1. But that being said, they're very nice. They don't bounce all over again, which I'll keep bringing back to the squig dice. And the symbols on the other ones, which on some dice can be a little awkward, these are great. These are fantastic. And I also like the cooling magma type colours of them as well. So the dice are excellent. In fact, I think they're my second favourites now, after the Skaven ones, which I still think are amazing. So if we come to the book itself. Now, first of all, this is the limited edition one. And since I've been getting back into Age of Sigmar, where possible, I have been getting the limited edition ones. I wasn't able to get it for the Beast of Chaos because that sold out immediately, which is one of the annoying things I have about the limited edition aspects. So the dice are limited edition. Once they've sold out, they're sold out. And I think these actually have now sold out. That's annoying because these are actually quite nice. But what's especially galling is when the War Scroll cards are limited edition as well. Because, all right, the dice being limited edition, fair enough. A limited edition rule book, fair enough, because you can just get a normal rule book, it's the same rules. But the War Scroll cards are actually useful. Incredibly useful just to have out with you. And to have something practical, limited edition, is not good. So I always moan about that. But the book itself, I just thought this was a bit strange. If you can see there, move the camera so it's a little bit easier. So I got 317 out of 366. Now, as of yesterday at least, you could still get these. And this is a week after you could pre-order them. So maybe that's a suggestion that, I mean, assuming I was the 317th person to get them, and they might not, they just might be in random boxes somewhere. But what I found odd was that there was only 366 of them prepared. And it got me to looking through some of the other limited edition books, and it's the least, although there was one that got 400 as well. I think that might have been Flesh Eater's Cause, which again, like the Fyreslayers, is one for which this is an updated book. There was a Battletome for first edition Age of Sigmar, and the fact that they're bringing out so many is probably a suggestion that they want to get everything updated to second edition ASAP. But then Blades of Khorne was also a reissue, and there was 1,000 of those made, so that's quite incredible. But anyway, there we go. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily expect this to be the most popular one anyway. So what I want to do here is just to have a look through the way that the army fits out. Now, one of the things straight away that's pretty good is in terms of battle traits, they have the Your Gold runes. Now, the idea is this is you've got 6 runes, and at the start of your hero phase, for each battle phase, you decide to apply one of these. And it includes things like, you know, being able to add something to your movement or add to your hit rolls or something like that for a particular type of weapon. And you have to choose a different one for each battle round. So 5 battle rounds, you've got 6 of these runes. So you are, if the game lasts the full duration, going to be using all but one of them because you cannot reuse the same one in different turns. And the other nice thing as well is it's got what's called an enhanced effect. So you roll, when you've decided to apply your rune for that turn, you roll a d6. If it comes out as a 1 to 5, nothing really. But if it comes out as a 6, you get the enhanced effect. So just to give one as an example, one of the ones which you might think first turn possibly would be a good time to use this, you get to add +2 to your movement. But if you get the enhanced effect, then that's also +2 to charge rolls as well. So that's all quite nice. Now, you've got command traits and artifact power. Artifacts are power for different types of heroes, so different lists for different heroes. So for what is quite a limited army in the Fyreslayers. They've got quite a lot there. Magmadroth traits, you've got similar things to this in a few battle terms, not a great deal of them. So these are the monster mounts that 3 of the characters could be on, and it's a mount trait, so that's always really nice. You can only have it on one of them, although there is a special rule that you could adopt that allows you to put it on more than one as well. So that's nice. Now, the prayers are the really interesting bit, and the invocations. When I was first looking through the book, I was looking at it and thinking, the priests, because they don't have wizards, of course, being dwarves, or dwarden, as we're supposed to call them now, but they do have priests instead. Now, usually when you have an army that doesn't have wizards, they have something else to defend themselves against enemy wizards, things that can unbind. So Khorne has that, Caradhran Overlords has that. And I couldn't find anything in here. I thought, okay, these priests, all right, they've got prayers, like priests do, but they haven't got any unbinding rolls. That's not really fair. But then I looked at it and I thought, oh, actually, now that I've read it properly, this makes sense. So each of the priest type characters, for example, if we find one, Auric Runesmiter, has a prayer that they can chant. And it gives you, so for example, the Auric Runesmiter on Magmadroth can have a prayer on a 3+, it's answered, and it means they can pick a friendly Fyreslayers unit wholly within 12 inches or 18 inches if they take themselves a forge key. And you can re-roll wounds for attacks made by that unit until the start of your next hero phase. So that's fine. And then you've got a page where, it's entitled prayers, and I looked at it, okay, like with wizards and spells, and this is common for priests as well, they get to choose another one, so they can decide on turn to turn which one they want to cast. But that's not what these are. Although it says prayers, what they are actually, when you read it, is their blessings. It's a different thing. So each of the priests can cast one of their prayers, and it's just on a 3-up. Then there's a blessing which they get to choose for each character, and you can cast that as well, as long as you're not silly enough to give the same one, because you can't cast multiple of the same one. And then you have the magmic invocations. These are like the endless spells, which work exactly the same way as a prayer. In other words, you just have to roll. I think sometimes some of these things are a 4-up, but I think all of these are 3-up. And they're quite nice as well. And as I was reading it, what I was realising is actually, yes, so each of your priests can cast their prayer, and they can cast their blessing. And to be fair, your opponent has no way of stopping that because it's just a prayer. So actually, it's sort of fair. I get to cast my prayers and my blessings, and if necessary, if I have bought any invocations, I can cast that as well. It's also, I'm not having to choose. Like with an endless spell, normal wizards have to use one of their spell casts for that turn to do it. I don't. If I've decided to take one of these invocations, like the endless spells, then just one of them can cast it on top of all this other stuff that you can cast. So, it's fair dues. Neither side will be able to stop the other person doing their thing. It's entirely down to their cast roll or their prayer or blessing roll, whatever. So that's actually fine. That's okay. And some of them are quite decent. As you might expect, most of them are buffs as opposed to offensive. They don't necessarily directly damage the opponent, though some of them do. And then you've also got the Magmic Battleforge. Now, again, increasingly, armies are likely to get a piece of scenery that has some special rules. So the special rule of this one is at the start of your hero phase, if you've got a Fyreslayer's priest, any priest within 6 inches of it, then that means that any themselves and any other priest within 18 inches of it gets +1 to their prayer rolls. And as most prayer rolls are 3-up, that basically makes them 2-up. That's pretty nice. There's also another rule that means once per battle at the start of your hero phase, you could get a priest within 6 inches of it to use the energy of its stead to, until the next turn, allow all of your units to re-roll saves, or Fyreslayer units to re-roll saves of 1. But then you knacker the prayer buffing aspect of it. And do note here, and this is where probably, again, I need to pay attention to the wording. It does say, in terms of the main use, add 1 to prayer rolls. So that wouldn't presumably include blessings rolls, although I haven't read an updated FAQ yet, so we'll have to see on that. Then they've got sort of rules for like little lodges, they're called in this case. There's 4 of them, where you have to give your general this particular command trait if it gets a command trait at all. And as there are no unique characters apart from the Chosen Axes, which is like a Shadespire type thing, you would be able to do that in this particular case. But you have to give it the particular command trait of this. You have the first hero to get an artifact of power has to take this one, but you also get an extra command ability and you get an extra ability as well. And some of them are really nice. And the one that I quite like is the Greyford, which the main ability of this one is you can choose 2 additional heroes from your army to have artifacts of power. So you can actually, without any battalions, have 3 artifacts of power. But all of them actually look like they've got some, some things of interest. And for example, the Lofnir one is very much about the mounted monsters, the Magmadroths, and it allows different Magmadroths to have a trait, not just one. And I think also, is this the one that allows? Yeah, you can also have 1 additional behemoth in your army as long as every behemoth is a Magmadroth. In other words, you haven't taken. There isn't anything else in the list, but you could take as ally something else. As long as you haven't done that, it allows you an extra choice as well. So you could just have loads of characters on these things as well if you wanted. So, for an army that, let's face it, doesn't have a huge range, it's actually got some really nice rules. And this is why it's really important that all those rubbish battle tomes that were designed for first edition, I say designed, that's a strong use of the word, they should be updated because they're given much more depth. In terms of the War Scrolls, there's only like 3 main ones and then the big grand one. But that's because, again, there's a very limited range of units available to this. The ones that there are look decent, but they're also fairly pricey as well. So I'm not sure I'll be going into those. In terms of the choices, so there's actually lots of choices of characters. There's lots of hero choices. You've got 3 different choices riding a Magmadroth. And you've got quite a few other choices of character as well. And the one I particularly like, which I would definitely be planning on taking, is an Auric Runesmiter. So now with some of these, bear in mind, I haven't played or even looked at seriously Fyreslayers before the 2nd edition. Some of these will be the same. They haven't completely changed everything, but there are some changes that I've noticed. So this may have done this before anyway, but nonetheless, I settled on this, the Auric Runesmiter. So instead of setting this model on the battlefield, you can place this model to one side, say it's set up as reserve. Great, no problem. But why would you do that with a single priest? Aha. He also allows you with a subsequent deployment to decide to set that one up as well. Now you could use this to basically tunnel a character on Magmadroth behind enemy lines a turn or 2 later. So that, very nice. I was very pleased with that. The Doomseeker as well, I love the Doomseeker. Because, it's like if you're gonna attack the Doomseeker, you need to make sure you kill it. Because you look at its attacks, it gets a Runic War Eye and a Doomseeker Axe, and it's not brilliant. As a purely combat character goes, it's not going to do a huge amount of damage. This thing, it's all right, but it's not amazing. But if it's taken any wounds, so if it's taken 1 wound, it gets to add +1 to its damage of its melee weapons. If it's taken 2 wounds or 2 or more wounds, it gets to add +2. So at the moment, it's 1 damage for each of its weapons. But if you change that, if you do a couple of wounds to this thing and then it attacks back, it's going to be doing 3 damage for each wound that goes through that isn't saved. All of a sudden, then it's very good. It's a good combat character then. So it's like, don't ever attack this thing unless you're going to kill it in one go. Now, on to the main unit choices. And this is in some ways the sad fact of the matter. These 2 pages, you've got 3 types of unit. And this is it. These are your 3 non-hero unit choices, really. And you've got your Volkite Berserkers on the left there, which are just your bog standard guys, and their battle line for everything. But the other 2, the really interesting one, the Auric Hearthguard and the Hearthguard Berserkers, each of them can be battle line depending on your choice of character. Now, I have in the past talked about the fact that when you've only got a couple of battle line choices, and especially when one of those is dependent on your type of general, then that's very limiting. But then, let's be honest, it's 3 types of non-hero unit you've got to choose from. So it is very limiting. It's basically an army of naked guys. But I have to say, for an army of naked guys, having 5 up saves is not bad. And a couple of points of interest. So I'll take the Auric Hearthguard first of all. These are missile weapons. Now, you don't get a huge variety of troop type in this army. There's no war machines. There are no units that can fly. And there's no cavalry. It is basically naked guys running across the field. But that's a bit of a problem because they can't run very fast. And against an army, an army that wants you to come onto them so they can countercharge you and all the rest of it, that's going to be issues. But the Auric Hearthguard provide you at least with a decent missile attack option. So the Auric Hearthguard have magma pikes, which are 18-inch range, which is not bad at all. 2 attacks each, and the leader of this one gets an extra attack. And normally leaders, you can have different things, but the usual one is +1 attack on your close combat weapons. This one is specifically on the missile weapons. And so they get 2 attacks each. The champion would get 3 attacks on that. 4s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. That's actually not bad, you know. And with 18-inch range, okay, if you take the first turn, you think you're not going to be able to shoot anything. They've got a 4-inch move. Even if you shuffle up, you are still, if you've deployed directly opposite something that again deployed on its deployment line, you are almost certainly still 20 inches away from it. However, remember, one of the runes you can activate at the start of your turn is +2 movement. That would get you just about far enough to be able to shoot at something. And you take a few of these and you could do some damage. And the other thing is, if you can shoot at a monster, then there's some bonuses with the magma packs, because they do 2 damage a pop against monsters. And if you do any wounds against a monster, then that monster has to, what is it now, half the movement characteristic and subtract 1 from its hit rolls until the end of that player's next turn, which, if you end up with a double turn, could be several combat phases. So that's really useful. Now, where the other unit, the Hearthguard Berserkers, comes into their own, is they are tough as nails. I mean, as I said, it's already decent for essentially a load of naked guys running across a field to be quite tough with a 5-up save. But it gets even better for these guys, because on the face of it, duty unto death means that they get a 6-up save against wounds and mortal wounds. Okay, that's fine. But if they're anywhere near, if they're within 10 inches of a Fyreslayers hero, they get to add +2 to that roll. So that effectively gives them a 5-up save, followed by a 4-up save against wounds and mortal wounds. And both of these units, the Auric Hearthguard and the Hearthguard Berserkers, a couple of things. First of all, they come in blocks of 5, so you get 5 at a time when you get building your units. They've got 2 wounds each, which I don't think was the case before. I think that's new. And they only cost 120 points for 5. Now that's pretty decent. You know, that is very, very decent indeed. And again, I mean, they've got 2 choices here, but the broad axe is going to be the best choice for the Berserkers. You know, 2 attacks each, 3s, -1 rend, 2 damage. Nice one. You know, you get yourself a fair size unit of these. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is super limited, but actually, I'd be looking forward to getting an army of these. I would actually like to try these out. These are excellent. And then just to have a little look at the endless spells as well, or call them endless spells, Magmic Invocation, because they're not spells. So if we look at the Zargon Flame Spitter, this is again another useful shooting option. All of these are very good, by the way. You know, I'm not saying I would necessarily take it in 1,000 points because I'm not sure, depends. But the Flame Spitter. So again, it's a 3-up to cast it. You have to place it within 6 inches of prey, so you can't just shove it straight down the table straight away. But what it means is it has a 24-inch range, and it does shoot and attacks. And what it says is you roll 12 dice, and if you get for every 6-up, it's a mortal wound. However, you get to add 1 to the roll if there's 10 or more models in the unit, 2 if there are 20 or more models in the unit. So effectively, if you find it at a block of 20 something, then that's rolling 12 dice. Every 4-up is a mortal wound. Well, that's going to be like an average of 6 mortal wounds straight away to thin out some ranks. So that's very decent. The Runic Firewall I love. If you're going to have some naked guys having to run up a field, What you really don't want is people pelting you with spells. Remember, you can do nothing about the spells. If they get the casting rolls, they're going to get the casting rolls. But the Runic Firewall, this is not the only endless spell type thing I've seen that does a similar thing. There's a couple of others as well. Basically, it blocks line of sight. So it's against a 3-up save. You can place it anywhere within 18 inches of the priest. So you can actually get it a fair, even if you're back in your deployment zone, you can get it a fair way up the table. And what it says is a model cannot see another model if an imaginary straight line 1mm wide drawn from the centre of its base to the centre of the other model's base passes within 1 inch of this model. So you can stick it between where your troops are advancing and enemy wizards, say, or war machines or anything like that, assuming it's a war machine that needs line of sight, and it will block line of sight. And that is a very useful defensive tool as well. And then the Molten Infernoth. And again, the way this reads, you'd look at it and think, okay, if this was an endless spell, this would be a predatory endless spell. In other words, your opponent could potentially get control of it, but it's not. So unless your opponent is a Fyreslayer, they can't touch this. You know, again, it's a 3-up, set it within 12 inches, then you can give it a move. The move is like 2d6 inches, I think. Yes, it is. And then every unit that's within 3 inches of it, at the end of its move, you roll a die, and no, you roll 12 dice, sorry, and for each 6 suffers a mortal wound, and Fyreslayers are immune to it. There's a bit like the Vermintide thing for Skaven, in that your own troops are actually immune to it, so that's an added bonus there. So you don't even have to be super careful about where you place it. And also, if you've got any Fyreslayer models within 18 inches, they get +1 bravery as well. So, you know, and that's all excellent. And you can really make yourself some very, very nice combinations of armies to these things. So I think it's, you know, and as I say, you just, you know, you look at this, it's, just get that a bit closer. I mean, there's not much there. You know, there's just a few units, you've got a few battalion choices, but you can actually make, and I'm not saying it's got everything you could possibly need. As I say, there are no flyers, there are no, you know, war machines that will do very powerful shooting attacks, although you have got some shooting attacks. You've got no cavalry. You've got the fastest things are your Magma Dross. You on your characters, you could send those up, but they can't be easily supported by your other units. But you have got enough things in there, and there's lots of command abilities for the heroes as well that you can use, and you've got a lot of choices in there nonetheless to make something that's quite useful. So yeah, I'm looking at it. I was actually joking before I got this book that, oh no, what's going to happen now? Because we're getting ready for a league, a 1,000-point league game, and I'm probably going to go with Nurgle just because it's the only thing I've got. I've been lazy with the painting again. But I was joking like, oh yeah, maybe I'll be wanting to play these for it. And you know what? It's not a joke anymore. I might actually even try and do it because I'd like to. They're really nice. So anyway, what I would say about this, I think it's an excellent army, and as limited as it is in terms of the variety of models, and in particular the number of types of units you've got, I think you could make something very solid. I'm not saying like tournament beating. The proof of that would be if anyone starts taking them to tournaments and doing well in them. But in terms of just friendly games, I think you could make something very solid indeed.